Hello and welcome to Voices of Leadership. I'm Kathy Eastwood, the founder and CEO of E=Y and the author of the E3 Leadership Code, a human approach to high performance. At the core of the E3 Leadership Code is a simple idea. Leadership is not separate from performance. It is the driver of performance. A team's job is to deliver results. The role of the leader is to express clarity, engage people, and execute with discipline, all powered by emotional qualities. And when that happens consistently, you don't just get a better culture, you get better results. So, welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to introduce our guest and bring them on in just one moment, but we'd love to know where you're dialing in from. Feel free to share your LinkedIn profile and, of course, ask us questions. We love to hear from you. So let's get started. One of the things I've been focused on is making that connection more explicit around the E3 leadership code and people and performance, because leadership is a multiplier to a business profitability. It starts with people, retention, productivity, innovation, and that shows up in how customers experience the business. Retention, expansion, referrals, and ultimately that drives company performance and profitability. But too often, we treat leadership as something qualitative, when in reality, it is one of the most measurable levers we actually have. And at E=Y, we built an ROI calculator, and our guest today has been instrumental in helping me build that and really be able to quantify what's often invisible. Things like burnout, disengagement, lack of clarity. And when I walked Manny through this, our guest, he pushed me in two important ways. First, are we truly capturing the cost of burnout? And secondly, especially for small and mid-sized businesses, are we thinking big enough about value? Because it's not just about cost savings, it's about company valuation. So let me bring our guest in today, Manny Elango. Manny, welcome. So
Thank
excited
you.
to have you here. So let me tell you a little bit about Manny. He's currently the executive at Ignova Ventures, right? He brings a really unique perspective, almost 17 years of experience at Honeywell, time at GE Vernova, and he's visited hundreds of suppliers and customers. He has experience in consulting and now leading in a role where execution and results matter every single day. What I really appreciate about Manny is that he understands both sides, the operational reality and the strategic impact of leadership. So let's jump in and really start to impact. And we're going to jump right into burnout because too often this is really misdiagnosed as a business problem. So one of the patterns I've seen, Manny, is that burnout really gets called burnout in the typical world. It shows up as we're stretched. We're doing more with less. We just need to push a little bit harder to get this one thing done. But when I shared the ROI model with you, you challenged me to say, are we really fully capturing that cost? So, from where you sit, how real do you think burnout is? And what are leaders missing when they underestimate this burnout?
Sure. Thank you, Kathy. First of all, I wanted to thank you for inviting me. For this information sharing with the people, with your audience. I really appreciate it, and this is an exciting time, right? I mean, if you think about it, just to preface to your question, right? We are in the era of everything to be done fast, right? And the word that gets coined around the industry is great compression, right? Because AI can do the things much faster, right? So if AI and or the technology that one uses or the company uses, if that one gets faster, then where does it lie on, right? It goes back to the people in the company. Okay, hey, there's some collateral which is available. Why don't you go get to market faster, right? And that's what happens, right? So now you're using AI and your cycle time for building a product gets reduced by 30%, so what happens, right? It goes back to the people, right? Hey, why can't you develop faster? Why can't you reiterate? Why can't you get to the market faster so you can generate the revenue faster, right? And so indirectly, and this is what you were talking about, right? So what happens is that it goes to the people that who are in the company, right? And that causes the burnout. And as you rightfully mentioned, people in the company or HR within the company, they hear or think about it in different words, right? Or body language, right? And you might have seen, right, in recent years, the insurance cost is going up. Why is it going up? It's not just because of the health of the people just going down, but why is the health going down for the people, right? And then that's a indirect way of correlating that, it's a burnout, right? It's a
Right.
stress, right? So if you think about the data a little bit, right, 40 to 48 to 52% of the people talk about burnout. This is a global number, right? And regionally those numbers vary, and if you think about different industry, that number varies too. I had an opportunity to advise one of the nonprofit organizations here locally, and for them the burnout rate is around 88%. And it's because in a nonprofit organization you have to work with volunteers, right? And sometimes the people that who are working there, their salary range is a little bit different in comparison to a regular company, right? So because of that, the burnout rate is more. And even when you dig deeper into it, the managers burnout rate is more than the employees, right? So now you convert that, you said ROI, right? So you convert that into what is the cost involved in the company, right? So it's anywhere between $4,000 to $21,000 per head is cost, because directly or indirectly because of the burnout, right?
Yeah.
So the global, or even if you think about it from a US perspective, the impact is around $500 billion, right? So that's a huge number. And how can we affect that, or how can we impact to get that reduced, is what the topic is, right? I mean, that is something that squarely drops on the leadership. The leadership is the one that we can change and get the people engaged more to reduce the burnout, right? So to answer your question, that is what I'm seeing, not only within our industrial sectors or service sectors, but also nonprofit organizations. Burnout is number one.
Yeah, and I think, we've talked about this metric before. I've always looked at the employee engagement rate, right? So if you talk to Gallup, it's 21% of employees are actively engaged. And I think in the past, we would look at it from the engagement side of it. But I do think in today's environment where we are, it's going beyond just engagement. It's really going to that burnout side of it, of people are like, I just can't even do it, right? Or people saying now, like, I need to step back from this. And that's creating even more drawer cost to the business, right? You said cost now, it's not just retention, it's the cost when people leave and you have to rehire, the productivity, but now you really are insurance costs are going
Yeah,
up
yeah.
for a company.
And Kathy, that employee engagement comment that you made is very important. And I wanted to emphasize this one, so people can register this, is that, sometimes, I mean, good companies have service, right? And they wanted to find out, really there is an interest with the company to find out how the employees feel. But sometimes the questions were not structured to really get the things out, right? When people quit, and they call it as like the silent quit or quiet quitting, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah, I'm just leaving, because they do not want to burn bridges. They're just leaving. But the underlying fact is, okay, it's burnout, stressed, like I'm not able to spend more time with the family, right? I mean, these are the different type of things. So when you ask the questions properly, you would be able to string that out. Or if your leaders, right, are good and trying to understand what the employees talk about, listen, right, then it comes out as, okay, you can act upon it, right? And that is where, right, when you think about it, 70% of the employee engagement comes because of the manager's leadership.
Exactly. Because if you take some of those exit interviews and you really ask the question, I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, I've had a lot of jobs where I worked really hard and a lot of hours, but I loved it, right? There was an energy, there was a purpose, there was results were, coming from it. So I think the piece that we need to also think about is not just what's happening and all the stress in the world, but it's also, do you feel like you're validated? Do you feel appreciated for what you do? And I think that truly is that opportunity for that leadership to come in and make sure people are recognized for what they do and how they feel.
That's exactly right. So yeah, you asked the question, why were you able to put in more effort for the company without being stressed out? So the answer would lie somewhere in your leadership or the company's purpose, right? I mean, the company's purpose was not just making money, right? It was broader than just making money, right? Or your leader, the manager or the CEO that who you report to had a different vision, right? And that's what is going down, right? So, and that clearly talks about, like, okay, the importance of the leadership, importance of that awareness leadership or conscious leadership, and that's what I call it, right? That
Yeah.
directly impacts the burnout, and indirectly, and that's what we will talk about today also, it can turn into the savings and the money that you're looking for from a CFO perspective as well.
Yeah, and how do you, because we talked about this, right? And it was funny because I look at it from how do we, reduce the cost, right? Because when I first showed you the ROI calculator and the we also called it a leadership multiplier, but it is absolutely cost, but it's also the valuation of the business, right? So how do you look at it from creating value for the business when you're able to get people that are really led and excited, they're purpose driven, and they're engaged?
You have the ROI calculator, right? In the ROI calculator, you're talking about the turnaround cost or the turnover cost, right? And which is something that comes out of the burnout and which is clearly visible. And you also talk about the productivity uplift, right? So how one can be more productive, right? You talk about innovation uplift, right? The savings just because the innovation, and also from a customer standpoint, customer satisfaction standpoint, how you can increase the revenue, right? So you're quantifying, and that's by the way, it's a great thing, right? Because so far the leadership has been considered as a soft skill, right? And okay, a leader can do something good, it can be done, right? But now people like and the people that who are really talking about conscious leadership or conscious capitalism, right? They are shifting the people's thinking towards value, right? So and the indicators that what you were talking about is something that can be translated, right? So now whatever the dollar amount is, right? So you talk about, I was giving you like $4,000 to $21,000, right? Or 35 to 40% is the cost involved in rehiring somebody. And even if you rehire somebody, the productivity for the first 6 months is going to be down, right? So you took an attempt to change that and put that into dollar value, which is great, right? So where does that value go into? Right? It goes into the bottom line, right? So
Right.
previously, if you think about the P&L the last time or the last year or before this implementation or the training for the leadership, it was not there. So it directly go to the bottom line. And so in small to medium companies, that's a huge number, right? So when you think about that, say even roughly talk about $1 million or $2 million in the bottom line, but this one directly impacts the valuation of the company also. I mean, we always think, from an M&A standpoint, you are evaluating the assets, right? But at the same time, it is not clear how you put value around the goodwill of a company.
Yep.
This goes towards the goodwill, right? And that's going to be clear. Your investment for leadership development is going to be low, but the results of the $1 million or $2 million, and say that, if it is a manufacturing industry or a service oriented industry, your multiple is 8 to 10 or 12 times the value of your EBITDA, right? And
Yeah.
so now think about that $1 to $2 million multiplying by 8 to 10x, right? And that is the boost. If you think about $1 million, it's not, right? But when you think about more on that $10 million, that's the impactful, right? And so an owner of the business, like a private owners, and this is where we are talking about small to medium, right? They are more in tuned or incentivized to adapt a process or a leadership consciousness or training of the people within the organization to get that impact, right? And that's the impact. That's what you can show.
Yeah.
And
No, go ahead. Please finish.
no, I was going to close out with something like this. So a lot of these people, a lot of the industries, a lot of the companies think about these things these days, because it becomes more important, and that comes out people like you, that comes out from capital, like your conscious capitalism, right? The movements like that comes out from even industry 4.0 moving towards industry 5.0, right? So people are concerned and thinking about and investing, whether from external or internal within the company, to increase the leadership and improve the leadership to see that soft benefit turning into hard benefit.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things. Ralph's got a question, so I'm going to come to Ralph's question in a moment. But I was talking to a CEO the other day and taking over a new business, and I think it's $1 billion business. And what he's saying is, as he's walking in, trust is the most important thing for his business to succeed. And so when you think about that, that is something that you can't just wave a magic wand and create a culture of trust. That gets built over time. And you can't necessarily hire trust, you have to build it. And so as you're talking about that valuation of a business and what a company is going to come by, they want to buy a company that has a lot of trust, that has the employees that are engaged, they're excited, they're focused. And this is a good transition, that are willing to change, right? Because as you said, we're moving from 4.0 to 5.0, and I'm going to ask you about that. But we're changing, and AI and technology and a new way of business is changing. So we're going to need the people that really want to be there, that want to embrace the change, and that is going to truly change the valuation of a business. And that's where leadership truly does come in. So I love that. Let's answer Ralph's question, and then I want to come back and we're going to talk about this industry 4.0 to 5.0. So Ralph from New York City is saying, if a company you work for isn't a conscious company, how can I lobby from inside to change it into one? Is an ROI comparison the most effective approach?
Yeah,
What's your
that's
thoughts
a
on
good
that?
question. Yeah,
Because I
that's
think
a good
you had
question.
this question of me when we first met.
Yes. And also, I mean, Ralph, don't let yourself down because a company is like that, right? Because you can see the shift in the companies going from this end, from hard savings into the soft savings, or more thinking towards the human-centric leaders, right? And that's what they're trying to do. And Ralph, I would say that, first understand what your company is built with. What is the company value, right? I mean, what is your CEO or CFO thinking from their values perspective or their purpose perspective? And go and attack in that angle, right? Because speak their own language. That's what I'm saying. If ROI, if the money is what they speak, then speak in that language to convince. Because the gist of it is that, okay, hey, being present, having awareness in the leadership shifts, right? It changes the behavior of an individual leader, or it changes the behavior of the organization. And we know that in turn, it helps the organization, right? And not only help the organization, it helps the stakeholders, including the planet, right? So there are a lot more good to it, right? So you talk in the language of the people of your leader, right? If they are talking about money, you talk in the money, which is the ROI calculator, and like Kathy and other people, have this thing really tuned. You can go adjust the get the data, right? How many number of people that you work. If you say that the productivity boost happens like half hour saved per week per employee, or 2 hours, whatever it is, right? You can change it, and it can easily translate into dollars just like that. You speak in that language, right? Or as you mentioned about trust, if the people are more soft oriented, right? I mean, they don't want to really look into the numbers, but they're looking into like proof in the pudding, right? So there are multiple companies that who adapted these type of leadership that you can take as an example to show that these are the levers that can be moved. Like data, it's widely available, publicly available data is available, right? If a company is going towards this conscious leadership or awakened leadership, their margin increases, their profitability increases, right? You're talking about the culture of the people, engagement increases. There are multiple variables that you can take it and show to the people. So my simple answer is that talk the language of your leadership, and then you will be able to convince them.
Yeah, and I remember, Manny, when we first met, that was, we were talking, you have come from a space of really operational excellence and driving productivity, across an organization, rolling out tools and processes. And I think this was a bit of your awakening too,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes, yes.
To insert the people side of it. Oh my gosh, we're missing this piece of power, if you will.
Yes, yes.
Because, and I think about it, and there's this image that I have, and I haven't been able to get it down on a piece of paper. You might be able to help me. But if you think of an information and a knowledge company, and you try to compare it to manufacturing is very much lines and how do you get as quickly from point A to point B, right? In that perspective. But information knowledge, right, is relying on people. We don't have machinery in all of this. And the friction that happens from moving things from point A to point B are people,
Yep.
right? And it's emotions. And logic does not always move people, emotions do.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to think about is this is really a human approach now.
Yeah.
And to your point, it's so that the number is 23% more profitable as a business if you take the human first approach.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why
And
don't people do it?
because that's the easy thing, right? I mean, it is the easy thing to achieve, but it's the difficult thing to prove also. But that difficulty or the challenge of proving is changing, right? And you were talking about Industry 5.0. Industry 5.0 is nothing but human-centric leadership. The whole industry.
So let's pause and help explain this to the audience in case they've not seen it. What was Industry 4.0?
Yeah. So Industry 4.0 is, as you think about it, right, it's all about automation, right? I wanted to use more machines. I wanted to use more robots. I wanted to use sensors to collect data, right? And so it was more focused about processes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it had its own merits, and that was an era, right? We were in that time. But now that's going too much, and we are seeing these type of burnout. And so Industry 5.0 is centered around human-centric approach, right? So that proves, and to your point earlier, is that the synthesis or synchronicity between both, right? What you're thinking about from a conscious leadership or the human-centered approach and delivering the results are very important these days. You talked about lean manufacturing and the way that I grew up with, right? So yes, you need to achieve the results, no question about that, right? And you have to pound on that. You have to excel in that operational excellence to achieve the results, but without forgetting the hearts of the people that who are delivering the results. To your point, it's connected. These two things are connected. You cannot ignore the people portion of it and just do whatever the things that you can do from a cost cutting perspective and to achieve the cost savings, right? You cannot. And that's the problem. And that's the shift that the leaders are taking these days. You talk to me about, my awakening too, right? So in my early days, when I was involved in lean manufacturing, you know, and at that time, we had the book called The Goal, right? His name is Chainsaw Al, right? So he always goes and cuts people, to make more money, profits, So I admired, I was more like that, I myself think like, okay, hey, I'm going to be the Chainsaw Al, right? And I cut people. I cut, I'm an industrial engineer by trade, so I do process improvements to reduce the cost. I'm an expert in that. But later in my life, I realized that that alone is not enough. That alone is not sufficient. So think about it from a people that who are impacting and give a solution for the people to still get the savings that you can get. I'm not saying that don't cut the people. You cut the people, but you got to take care of the people that who are really involved in it, right? So in other words, bring the growth along with it in order to take care of the people.
Well, and let's go back to the engagement number and you think about it, right? So if you're cutting people and you're asking people to do more with less, they're getting burnt out and disillusioned and doing less. And so it is actually the impact is substantial. Whereas if you actually started to think about, okay, as individuals, how can we help you show up better? How can we help you produce more, right? Because you want to, you feel valued, you're inspired, you're motivated. Then suddenly we can all be working together. And it's not, I call it the virtuous cycle. You start to create the positive momentum, right? Where I feel really good. I'm really focused on my job. Not only that, but now I want to think innovatively. What can I do for the company? What else? How can we use new technology? How can we leverage new ways of working? And when I'm feeling good, I treat my customers well. And when my customers are excited, you feel it. Let's be honest. You call customer support or you get a bot or something like that. You're like, yeah, no, and that's going to impact customers buying more, being engaged. And then that's where the bottom line really comes in. So, how do you think about, Manny, when, obviously what's on top of mind for everyone right now is AI, right? So, how do you see the value of the leadership and building trust and the people as we go forward and we bring AI and this, this industry 5.0, I think is going to be the human centric, but a lot of people would argue with us and say, well, there's going to be less people needed.
Yeah, there are multiple ways, Kathy, but I wanted to introduce your own concept of E3 here. Okay, think about when AI is high with the company and technology is involved in the company. Think in those three terms, right? When you talk about expressing clear views and vision that is broader than just the profitability, right? And that needs to be clear and spread throughout the organization, right? People need to buy into those kind of things, right? And that's where you need to engage, and that's your second thing, right? You need to involve the right people, whether that is people within the organization, suppliers, customers, whoever that may be, right? You got to engage the people to think about why I am using AI, right? So you got to engage the people and then execute it, right? When you execute it, then people are clearly bought into the vision that you set up because you engage the people. If you're doing it in silo, then it's not, right? And this is part of that conscious leadership or awakened leadership that you're following to make sure that people don't say that AI is not good, I'm not going to use it, right? You're not getting that kind of thing, right? Or AI is taking my job away. No, I cannot do it, right? You're taking that away at the beginning itself, right? And this is the right opportunity. You got the tool E3. If we can follow that, and that'll yield the results, right? So that is, I mean, in a way, because it's a structured framework, right? And as I was telling you the first time when I talked to you, is that without knowing what I was doing, right? I was following these steps, luckily because of the lean background, and but you have certain framework, why not adapt those kind of things? And that's what I would say.
I love it. And I thank you for that, because it's fun to hear it come back at me, right? I've been talking about it for so long. It's nice to hear it land. And I think that the big piece of it, which is what's really connected us, and you say connect to the hearts of the people, is the emotional intelligence.
Yes, yes,
And that's
yes.
what, as we move forward into this industry 5.0, as you talk about, that's what's critical. And any
Yeah,
leader that is not embracing that emotional intelligence is going
yeah,
to be on their back foot at this point,
yeah,
right? Because you
yeah,
can't, we had a phrase back in the HP days, I used to call it that we had to get blood from a stone. It was hard, right? And it can be so much easier when you really are working together with your teams, with your people, inspiring them, enabling that. That's our job as leaders. We
yeah, yeah,
need to make this a better space, a better workplace, because we're going to deliver better results as a result.
yeah,
So
yeah. No, that is true, and even I wanted to address Ralph in here. So this journey is not like a fast journey. It's not going to yield you quarter over quarter results immediately. When you talk about a culture change, right? This is the transformation that you're taking the organization to, and that's going to take some time, right? And it's going to yield results initially in subtle way before it really shows up from a dollars and cents standpoint, right? And so understanding a CEO or CFO up in the chain top level, understanding that and committing to that is going to be very important, right? So it's not an easy journey. It has to be, bought in, and you cannot follow it for 3 months and then, oh no, it's not doing anything, let me take it out, right? So no, you need to be bought in, completely committed in order to completely change the organization.
I agree. And you're reminding me of like, and I think that's why a lot of leaders do embrace this command and control style. And I'm just going to tell you what to do, because it does. I mean, to be fair, you can get some short term results from it,
Yeah,
but it is just that, it's short term.
yeah,
And so if
yeah,
you want long term results that are going to help ultimately grow the business, you need to take a different approach, and you can't
yeah,
cut your way to success, for
yeah,
a
yeah.
long term perspective.
Exactly. See, the command and control, the word that you use, right? That need to shift from that to empower and enable. And this is where you were talking about empathy. I mean, you can talk about different terminologies, right? That you can use, but shifting the thought from command and control to empower and enable is the foundation. It's the fundamental. Once if you have that shift, then you're in good hands, right? Then your organization is going to thrive.
Absolutely. And that really does become a competitive advantage for companies.
And this is where the valuation, you're talking about the valuation, right? I mean, if you're able to show that to the people that who are buying the company, the multiple can go by 2 points, right? 2x, just because of this, right? But if you wanted to implement some new technology or invest in R&D, there's so much dollar that you have to spend to increase the multiple by one, right? I mean, if you wanted to create a moat around your product, nobody can compete against it. That takes money, right? But this one takes time. You don't have to spend that much money as long as you're involved and you know that this multiple is really great, in comparison to invest more, invest less, but the multiples that you're going to get from a return on your investment is huge. And that's where you talk about your multiplier. People talk about that, right? You can, and you can talk about, even the ROI that I was talking about, right? I mean, these are all like the measurable things, but there are intangibles as well, right?
Yep.
And if you want to really look, people that who bought into this type of style, they can look at the return on leadership as a whole, talking about tangible and intangible over the cost that you're investing in order to get the return, right? And that's the right way to look at it. And people,
Yep.
we are going there. We will go there. We will achieve that.
Absolutely. Well, Manny, thank you so much for joining us. You had so many incredible insights. I love the data behind it, that operational excellence, and watching it turn of how emotional qualities are really going to help companies drive better results. It's not a question of should I take care of my people or drive high performance. You drive high performance with your people and focusing on
Yeah,
them. So
yeah.
thank you so much for joining. For those listening, you can reach out to Manny. We have his LinkedIn profile. Please feel free to reach out and say hello and engage him in this conversation further. And also, if you want to learn more about this ROI calculator and this multiplier tool that we've been talking about, just type in ROI in the comments and we will make sure that you get a copy. Thanks so much. I hope you all have a great weekend and we'll talk to you soon. Take care.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you all. Appreciate it.